Hello and welcome to a very interesting, and whilst it's our last session, it's a very interesting and dynamic session. I'm really looking forward to it. We have with us METTE JOHANSSON, who will be sharing with us a very, very interesting topic on the narratives and the stories that hold women back. So METTE, thanks a lot for making the time. A quick introduction before I give you the floor. METTE is the founder of METTEMind Training, which is a Singapore-based but globally active training company that transforms managers into leaders. She's the founder and chair of the Keynote Women Speakers, which is a directory of women speakers all over the world. And she's one of the 6 co-founders of the Inclusive Leaders Institute. METTE worked in corporate leadership positions for 2 decades before she found her calling as a social entrepreneur, and she helps others find their purpose in leading authentically and unlocking their energy to accomplish extraordinary things. So METTE, a great pleasure, and I'm looking forward, and I will give you the floor now and remove myself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Radu, and the pleasure is mine. Yes, what we will be speaking about today is about the narratives, the stories that hold women back at the workplace. Let's launch directly into it. In 2019, at some point of time, I was having after-meeting drinks with about 8 male executives. This was about 2 years after the heights of the Me Too movement. And one of the male executives says, "You know, METTE, the Me Too movement has gone way overboard. It's tragic how many men on Wall Street are losing their jobs and are fearing for their careers." I asked him, how many men are losing their jobs right now? He didn't have the answer, and he continued instead, "Oh, I don't know the number, but it's tragic, it's loads." I asked then, after a little while, "Do you know how many women have been exposed to sexual harassment?" There was a short pause, and he didn't know the answer. I didn't expect him to know the answer either, so I continued. "You know, it's over 80% of women, whether rich or poor, black or white, educated or not, have been exposed to sexual harassment." So yes, I feel very sorry for the individuals who've had that traumatic experience of being falsely accused for sexual harassment at the workplace. But aren't we a little bit out of balance here with our narrative? He couldn't understand where I was getting at, and he continued to say how horrible it was for those poor bankers on Wall Street. I didn't have the numbers then. I do have them now. I looked into it, and I saw that around that time, there were exactly 2 guys who had been accused, perhaps falsely, for sexual harassment, who were in danger of losing their jobs. 2 people. Put this in contrast to the 3 billion women on this planet who are exposed to sexual harassment. Now, isn't the story a little bit out of balance? Have you heard the story, "Me Too has gone too far"? Whether you have or not, I can tell you that that evening at the Singapore River, where you saw the picture just now, where I was having the conversation, not one single of the 8 men stood up for the women who are sexually harassed at the workplace. Not one single of the men that I was with was challenging the narrative. Can you imagine what effect it has on women when we're continuing to tell the story that Me Too has gone too far, when the numbers that are right here on the screen tell a different story? I want to shatter a lot of these narratives. And this is a book that I'm writing together with my business partner that will cover a lot of these. Let us take you to the US for a moment, where right now, and this is not a political discussion, yes, the next president of the United States is Biden, and his vice president will be Kamala Harris. The day that this became clear, there was a lot of positive news around her, and there was also a lot of negative news around her. There were things said such as, she's a token woman because of her gender, because of her color, that's why she was chosen. Now, there was also a lot of stories around, yes, excuse my language, she slept her way to the top because of her relationships. She got into some more important positions. Let's stop these narratives. You can think about Kamala Harris what you want. Your political conviction can be whatever it is. Now, can we agree upon that for the Democratic Party, Kamala Harris fits the job description? She's smart, she's eloquent, she inspired people around her. And still, we are digging out the dirt. We are talking about these narratives that women often suffer from. What about at your workplace? Are there any women that suffer from the same thing? Are there any women who are described as, oh, she's a token woman? Or are there even any women who are being accused for using relationships to get where they are? Please stop the narrative. Let's focus instead on, what is she good at? Why was she chosen for this? Is she a very competent people leader? I bet you she is, if she was chosen for that. And you know what? If a woman has made it that far, if a minority in a company, a person in a weaker power position has made it that far, I can bet you that they have had a lot of adversity that they had to face along the way. See, for instance, this cartoon. It has a small drawing here of a man and a woman who both are striving to get to that promised land at the top of the game. And the woman has quite a few obstacles to get through before she gets there. The obstacles on this drawing represent the 7 hours of additional unpaid work that women face in the home after leaving a full-time job. And this is care work, care of elderly, care of children. It's household work, cleaning, cooking. Women face more obstacles on their way to a career path. So if they've made it that far, they've probably done a pretty damn good in balancing all of this, right? There's another narrative that I would like to address and hopefully challenge. It's about meritocracy. We take the best person for the job. It's what I hear all the time when we work on inclusion. Now, think about it. There was this HR director that I spoke to this week, and she said, yeah, my mostly male leadership board also said that if there are 2 people with exactly the same qualifications, all other things being equal, we will take the woman. And she added, when is it ever equal? When are ever all other things equal? It's not. We're comparing apples and oranges. Meritocracy is an illusion. Recruiting, appraisals, promotion, it is about comparing apples and oranges. Now, for instance, we take the best person for the job. Then at the same time, your company might have an ad, a job description, or even a description of what leadership is. It sounds like this. We want somebody, a leader who drives results. We want a leader who's a strong negotiator. We want a leader with a winner's attitude. Does that sound familiar to some of you? Now, there's a few challenges with this. One of them is that as a woman, often we don't really feel that that applies to us. We don't see ourselves as a leader when we hear those words. That means that you're not appealing to women and their sense of leadership. That's the first issue. The second issue is when women start to adapt this behavior, what happens? They are being accused for being too pushy, too cold, too aggressive. Women cannot get it right. It's so difficult to get it right here. Now, if your company has a job description or leadership descriptions that sound more like this, it's a bit better. We are looking for a compassionate team builder with a track record of developing people and going that extra mile for clients. What women now see is, I'm looking for building teams, taking care of others, developing them, and also truly taking care of the customers. Many more women will feel attracted to this job description rather than the other words that I shared on the previous slides. Meaning that very often when companies do have the job description that were on the first slide, you will not get as many women into leadership as when you describe it like this. Now, if you're on the call, you're a man, and you say, hey, hang on, this also suits me. I like this better. Well, fantastic, because the world needs more of this. And if we define leadership qualities gender neutrally in this way, women will also have a much better chance at getting into leadership positions. It's a systemic flaw when we use words that are appealing more to men, and it's not the only systemic flaw. Meritocracy is throughout flawed. If you don't believe me, let me ask you a question. Have you ever worked for somebody who was less competent than you are? Have you ever seen somebody in the hierarchy where you thought, how on earth did that person get to that position? When I asked this question in a group full of people in a room, in contrast to, of course, right now, I cannot hear your reaction. Every single time somebody goes spontaneously, oh yeah, in a way that I know that they have a name and a face exactly on that person who's less competent than them and still have made it further in the company. Meritocracy is an illusion. It's totally flawed. We sorted that fast, didn't we? All right. Companies are still striving for it, although there is no real meritocracy. Perhaps we can ask different questions. Perhaps we can go and rephrase it to, should we choose who's best for the company? Huh? I hear you think. Yeah, let's choose the person who is most suitable for the company, for the team. Diversity increases group intelligence. We've seen this in many studies. For instance, this one by BCG. It shows that companies with below average diversity scores have innovation revenue of 26%. Now, if this goes up with above average diversity scores, innovation revenue also goes up to 45%. That's quite a bit of a difference, isn't it? That deserves a dramatic entry of the difference in EBIT. 9 percentage points additional EBIT if you have above average diversity scores in your company. Is that a good reason to focus on diversity? I believe there's a business case right there. And in fact, if you as a leader can swipe away 9 percentage points extra EBIT and also doing good morally and ethically, then I don't know. All right, you might still ask, but they're not ready yet. I don't have anybody in the pipeline. Well, then get them ready. And I have a tip of how you can make this happen faster. In meritocracies, we very often focus on equality. Give everybody equal opportunities. Well, this is also the wrong way of looking at it. And this cartoon, you might have seen it already because it's quite a bit out there. Equal opportunity, equality is not necessarily the best thing for your team. This is about a cookie cutter approach where we give everybody a box so that they get the same treatment. You can see on this picture that everybody getting a box is not the best solution, is it? Instead, it is looking at what do individuals need to succeed. That's equity. Give them 2 boxes if that's what they need. The first person doesn't need a box at all. Treat people in a way that they can be successful in their own right. So let's have a look at this person. Maybe somebody from your company. Maybe you have somebody in mind who needs that little bit different treatment in order to be successful. And what does she need? Do you have somebody in mind? Does she perhaps need some mentoring? Then give her the mentoring. And by the way, as a side remark, women who have had male mentors are usually more successful than women who have had female mentors. It's probably also because some of the male mentors see that, wow, this woman actually has quite a bit of good qualities and will open doors for them. So perhaps it is extra mentoring that she needs. Or what about a coach for the first 100 days in her new job? What about a supportive environment? It's a way of changing the environment so it's more supportive for her as a leader. Or also, what about a tailored women in leadership program? This is where I'm challenged a lot, where a lot of people say, well, why a separate women in leadership program? Hopefully the next slides will convince you. This is what business schools are like. I did an MBA, and some of the books that I studied, although this is already a couple of decades ago, are on this slide. Think about who are the authors of these books taught at the world's best MBA programs. They have one thing in common. They're typically white, and they're typically men. On top, they're typically American. The rules of the business world have quite literally been written by the white American man. So no wonder that women sometimes have more challenges navigating this world. Leadership has been defined with a man's view of what it is. No wonder that women sometimes don't see themselves as leaders. Women and men do sometimes behave differently, and we can always have a different discussion of whether that's nature or nurture. A very simple situation that you've probably also been exposed to in the past. If we have somebody who identifies more with male behavior and somebody who identifies more with female behavior, here I've illustrated them. I've randomly picked apples to represent the ones who identified with male behavior, and oranges for those who identify more as a woman. All right, if you have those two groups of people, the apples and the oranges are equally qualified to do the job. Then they see a job ad. What typically happens? The guy says, yes, this is made for me. I'm going to go for it. This is made for me. And the woman goes like, oh, well, I don't exactly fill that criteria. I'm not so good at that. And the I can do it, all of a sudden, that level sinks women below the man. Then there is, will I apply for this? Yes, of course, because the man is convinced that this is made for him. And the woman goes like, it's maybe not really me. I might apply. And those who have 7 extra hours of unpaid work, they might not even have the energy to apply for it. So this is what your application pool looks like. Then we have the next step. We're at the interview and the man goes, take me. The man is very good. The man is very good at selling himself. And the typical female behavior is to be quite transparent about, this is what I'm quite good at, and this is maybe what I'm not so experienced in yet. This is the picture that recruiters see. Recruiters see a lot of shining green apples and a few less shiny oranges. This is what you see at an interview. So you can go ahead and take that extra risk in recruiting minorities, in recruiting women. I also shared with you just now that there is a very big upside for this, isn't there? 9 percentage point additional EBIT. Plus, minorities have made it through a lot of adversity also to get to this point, typically. Leadership is also not very gender specific, unless our company advertises it that way, unless our leadership principles are written in that way. In fact, an HBR article last year defined that women are outperforming men in 17 out of 19 modern leadership skills. Women were outperforming men. So yes, leadership is not gender specific. We can all be leaders. And the last point, minorities are very likely to be hidden gems for all of the reasons that I mentioned just now. Can we please shatter the narrative? Can we please shatter the narratives that companies are meritocracies, where you hire the best person for the job? Can we please reframe it to hiring the best person for the company? And can we then afterwards please focus on equity, giving that person what she or he needs in order to be successful? We can help We have a Women in Leadership program that is launching next Friday, where we focus on how women can navigate rules of the business world that have been written for men. We will also focus on what is it that women need to learn, because we've been taught to be good girls along the way. And some of the narratives are further reinforcing that. If you join us, if you're quick, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. The QR code is here. Get your phones out, take a picture of it and connect with me on LinkedIn. If you're fast, we'll give away 3 free coaching sessions for whoever signs up for the program. It's a 5-month program that is starting next Friday. And do connect with me on LinkedIn, because I would love to announce also when the book about the narratives, the stories that hold women back, is being published, so that you will not only be able to shatter this narrative, but every single narrative that's being told out there over and over again. And by us telling them over and over again, they get a life on their own. We start taking them as face value. They become the truth for us. Let's shatter these narratives and give women a bigger chance. Thank you, and back to you, Radu.
Thank you very much, Mette. Very profound and insightful and real presentation. So much appreciated. We have quite a few questions, and I'd love to take some and ask you, because I think quite a few of our audience have been wondering a couple of things. So Tina is asking, how can we create a work environment where both women and men can openly communicate and empower each other? And if you have some examples of organizations with strong cultures around this.
This is interesting. There were a lot of questions there. I'm not sure whether I remember all of them, so do let me know if I didn't answer all of them. Now, it's interesting because some companies who say we're not very good at this, they are in fact the ones who are the best at it. If you look at a company like Microsoft, for instance, they talk about how they're not so good at creating this sense of belonging, that everybody belongs no matter what background they have. That is when you create a good, inclusive culture. It is about being very consistent about it, being very conscious about it all along the way. You cannot tread lightly. Like the example that I mentioned just now, where I was in a conversation with 8 men. We're talking about the Me Too movement going too far, and everybody is leaving it at that. Maybe because it doesn't interest them, maybe because they don't know, maybe for whatever reason. When we hear those narratives, we need to call it out. We need to call out the behavior. If somebody in a meeting is interrupted, and that person is from a minority, or women are not really minorities, right? We're 50% of the population, but in a less powerful group. If somebody from a less powerful group is being interrupted, call it out and say, I would like to hear what Sharon has to say on this matter. And if it's continuing, then say, Peter, would you please stop interrupting Sharon? She has some very valuable insights that I would love to hear. So it is about calling it out, calling out the behavior. Also, like the sexual harassment that I mentioned here, it is a real thing at the workplace. And even during COVID, there have been studies that show that it's in fact sometimes on the increase, because women have been told to make themselves prettier on the screen so that they can convince the clients better. You know, there are a lot of these microaggressions, those faux pas that you don't want to make happening even during COVID, where there is social distancing. It is about calling it out immediately, making sure that you don't permit this behavior to take root. Another one that's happening so often is jokes that are being called, jokes with sexual undertones, or, oh, she probably showed a little bit too much leg for getting that promotion. Immediately turn it around and say things like, would you have said the same if that would have been a man? So turn it around, or say, oh, that was not appropriate. I will pretend I didn't hear that. Can we start all over again? Call it out immediately, stand up for it, and stand up for others. Only when we do that, that's when the world is going to change. Did I answer all those questions from Tina?
I think you did.
Okay,
you did.
Good.
Thanks for that, Mette. And again, thanks for keeping it real. These are, real issues. They're real problems. I also want to ask a question coming from Simon, because this is very real as well, in terms of what can men do. And Simon is asking, what are some male leaders that have that you have come across and that have done a lot in terms of creating a culture where women feel empowered, and how can we get more men aware and coming to the cause?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you very much, Simon, because we need more male allies. It's one of the things that we also work on, that is about programs to get more male allies. We don't want this to be a discussion that's simply reserved for the women only. And I know that I was quite provocative with some of the things I said today, and I hope it's not in a way that men feel excluded. I simply want to be provocative so that we start questioning things a little bit more. We need to work in this with this together. So what can men do? Stand up again for the women when you see these things happening. That is the very first thing you can do. And I know that it is sometimes difficult for a man to call out behavior. When you're in a group of men, there's locker room talk, then to say, hey, I believe that we could be a little bit more respectful to the women in this room. Sometimes men then also are like, ho, 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 talk down and being excluded and being ridiculed in that situation. So it is being as strong as you can in that situation, making sure that you call it out, and simply listening to a little bit more of these women's conferences where this is being discussed. It's important that we have a dialogue between all genders, and that people understand where everybody is coming from. Like, one of the things that we face a lot when we talk about male allies is that men are afraid of being excluded, that they don't have the same promotional chances anymore. I'm quite convinced, thinking back at that 9 percentage points a bit, right? What does that allow us in terms of growth? A lot. We're making the pie bigger by adding diversity. And also, if we can stop promoting incompetent men, there's more space for competent women, isn't there? And this is, in fact, a book by Thomas Chamorro. I don't remember what his last name is. He is the one who is advocating this very much, that we simply need to focus more on the competencies of women. I believe that as a man, what you can also do, I hinted at that in the presentation just now, is to make sure that you also embrace what is seen as typically female characteristics in your leadership repertoire, so that you will also lead with care, compassion, so that this is seen as great leadership when you care about your customers, when you develop your teams, when you are building the teams together instead of knocking each other out. When you adopt this leadership behavior, you're doing women a great favor as well.
I will just chip in to your point, my own story a little bit, because it might kind of reinforce what you shared. So I was, well, to be honest, I was oblivious of all these challenges that women have, because I'm not a woman, as is quite obvious. And when I first got slightly aware, I think it was 3 years ago, and then over time I got more aware of some of the perspectives and issues and challenges that you would face as a woman. And yeah, recently whilst in my mind I was very open, and I'm there for diversity and all. And then I shared a piece of content which had 12 men on it, and it said the top leaders in supply chain. And I saw that there's only men, but it didn't quite boggle me that much that I didn't share it, right? And then two women called me out. It doesn't matter if it was women or men, actually, but that's when it became so obvious to me, like, oh yeah. And, and this is come on, it's not possible that in supply chain or whatever industry it's only men, or it's only one color, or white, or whatever it might be, right? So I think that's when it popped on me. But what happened, and what I want to stress based on your points as well, is mirror and challenge, and somebody telling, flag it, because I don't think that we are really intent as human beings. I think there's a lot of unconsciousness and unconscious bias, and unless you become more and more aware and we help each other. Now, of course, you shouldn't be super aggressive necessarily, but I think it's better to be aggressive and say it rather than say nothing, because then the person definitely doesn't realize it. So this point that you just made, I could not agree more, and it has been a great learning and hopefully lesson for myself, and I'm trying to be better every day at this. So thanks for
Radu.
Mette. With this being said, I want to thank you. We've gotten a few other questions, but I want to encourage everybody to connect to Mette on LinkedIn, and also follow her for the book. She posts a lot of inspiring stories, and I think she's somebody that you should stay in touch. Mette, thanks a lot for joining us, and thanks a lot for keeping it real.
Thanks for having me, Radu.